Welcome everyone to our NFSN National Farm to School Network Coffee Chat. Please again share the video, tag people so that they can join the conversation. A little bit about NFSN, if this is your first time tuning in, we are an information advocacy and networking hub for communities working to bring local food sourcing, school gardens, and food and agricultural education into the school and early care and education setting. And our mission at the National Farm to School Network is to increase access to local food and nutrition education to improve children's health, strengthen family farms, and cultivate vibrant communities. And we do all of that by focusing on advocacy, people, and resources. So simply, we're all about how do we connect people to policy, and people to the tools that they need. And so we're really excited about the call to action that we launched last October, which is that 100% of communities would hold power in a racially just food system by 2025. And so these coffee chats is really our continued conversation from our movement meeting where we launched our call to action so we could talk about shifting power and racial equity. So every single conversation we have here is going to be centered from that lens. And I want to take a moment to thank the National Co-op Grocers for their support of National Farm to School Network, and their support helps make these coffee chat series possible. If you're another organization that wants to sponsor these coffee conversations because you think it aligns with the mission and vision of your organization, please reach out. So today we're having a conversation focused around how we feed our community. And our special guest is Chef Asada. Please tell me I said it right.
Asata.
Asata, thank you. So Chef Asata is a chef, author, health educator who founded Life Chef LLC, its culinary education services, which focuses on healthy cooking and nutrition for all of life stages. She is also the founder and president of the nonprofit Feed the People to help improve food access, food affordability, and food equity in the community. In 2021, she self-published How to Feed a Kid, a parenting guide to help parents navigate the nuances of feeding children from birth to adulthood. The easy to read guide touches upon common hurdles such as picky eating, going plant-based, feeding young athletes, and planning and budgeting. Written with humor and a succinct format, she calls the book a love letter to parents because we are all in this together. It is available on Amazon.com and Walmart.com. She also partners with the Small Bites Adventure Club, where she develops recipes, conducts trainings, and helps prepare the taste test boxes that serve as turnkey teaching kits for educators to help children discover, eat, and love the fruits and vegetables. So, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I'm really excited about this conversation. As everyone knows, we have a very laid back, no cut cards, as a lot of my friends like to say, conversations where we just call it as it is. So just thank you so much for being here. And I want to turn it over to you if you want to say anything before we dive into our first question.
Thank you, Crystal. I'm so happy to be here, and I love the work that the National Farm to School Network does. You guys are an incredible resource, and just really happy that we're able to kind of walk this path together to improve the health of our communities.
It's key. When we talk about our call to action and being a network, we just know not one person nor one organization can do this work. We have to do it collaboratively, right? We have to do it together.
Absolutely.
So we're going to start with letting you tell us a little bit about the organizations that you're part of and the work that you're doing, just diving a little bit in what you do day to day in this movement.
Well, with Small Bites Adventure Club, it's funny you mentioned collaboration because that's how this sort of came together. There were people working in farm to school here in Georgia, and we would all cross paths and be on the same panels and show up for the same trainings. And we could never cover the state, could never cover getting enough schools, getting enough cafeterias, getting enough daycares. You just could not be everywhere at once. And Small Bites was developed by Aaron Kroom and Judith Winfrey to be a kit that puts us all in the box. The farmer is in the box. The chef is in the box. The educator with the learning standards is in the box. Arts and crafts is in the box. But most importantly, connection to local growers, local produce that is seasonal, or even just connecting children to the concept of seeds, of living soil, of really where their food comes from and who provides the food. All of that is in the box. So now we don't have to be everywhere. Personally, we put our decades of knowledge and professional research and education into this box. It's a work of passion for everyone involved. And we ship around the country. It started here in Atlanta, but now we have kits that go to schools, our taste test kit, but we also have our farm to home explore kits, because during the pandemic, kids were home. So we retooled it, we rethought about it. How can we connect parents and kids? And so that's its own kit that works at home without a teacher. And then we have the kits that go into classrooms and after school programs that are designed to be in a classroom as a tool. So that's Small Bites in a nutshell.
No, that's awesome. And I think just what you said, it's so important to figure out how can we all come together with those touch points. And that's what I really like about Small Bites. Like you said, it's the opportunity for producers, for the chefs, the teachers, all those touch points, right, to be working together to create these experiences for children at home or in their classrooms. And I think we definitely saw a lot of that during the pandemic because school had to look different. A lot of parents turned into teachers
Yes.
overnight, right? And they needed all the tools that they could to
Yes.
help educate and reach their children in the best way possible. And so I definitely could see how programs like this could be beneficial in the classroom, but also in families. And
Yes,
so,
because we've seen in research that children need multiple touch points
mhm,
to their food. Well, to learn anything, but multiple touch points in order to have the confidence to try new things. And inside of our kits, it's not just that you get to taste it or that you just get to make it. We make connections with literally where it comes from. Here's the farmer, here's the region of the state, here's the country that these spices came from. So we're looking at the world and we're connecting we're connecting people from around the world in this food system. This isn't the food system that we know it, but this is the food system that could ideally be if everybody was a part of it. And children get real life skills, learning how to cut, learning how to measure, learning how to take temperature, exploring their soil, actually growing a seed all the way to a sweet pea plant. They get to do all of that from these books. I mean, not these books, from these kits.
yeah.
So our goal is to empower children, not just to become consumers, but
Mhm.
to be a part of their food system, to be educated and knowledgeable, to be confident and competent in feeding themselves and their families. Because as a health educator, when I work with adults who have diet-related illness, if they were not introduced to real food and agriculture as children, they're lost as adults when it comes to changing. And this is where you hear all this, oh, changing my diet is so hard. I don't know what to eat. I don't know what to cook. I don't know where to get it. It's so expensive. It takes so much time. That's someone who wasn't taught how to prepare food and how to feed themselves. And
Mm,
now they struggle as an adult. We're hoping to draw a line in the sand so that we have empowered, informed kids who have resources that don't have to have those struggles down the line. So it's a cute kit, both of them. They're adorable. Our illustrations are so cute. Everything is just, it's cute to death, but it is an activist statement. We're saying no more. We're taking these kids and we're going to show them where their food comes from and how to grow it and how to cook it so that they have these skills for life. And then they can teach their kids and it goes forward.
yeah, I love that. Making sure that they're part of the food system. And when we talk about just the whole huge issue of like feeding our community, the first thing I think we always try to look at, like, what are those barriers that you see around food access? So when you think about what are those walls up for us to even be able to truly have food access in certain communities and possible solutions, what do you think those are?
Well, the ones that everyone likes to talk about are that, oh, the community doesn't know, and or they don't have access. They don't have access to food. But I've worked on so many like on the ground, uh, different community outreach type things where, we're giving away tons of food, literally tons of food. And I've seen it over the years. I've been at community farmers markets where the farmers are there. They're happy to answer questions. The food is here. There's not a lack of food. There's a unequal distribution of food that needs to be addressed. But then there's also, what do you do with the food? People have not been taught. Home ec has been out of schools forever. We have families that are all broken up and scattered. The skill, the art of growing and cooking food has fallen through the cracks. So I could drop off a ton, literally, of food at your front door, but if you don't know how to preserve it, you don't know how to cook it, you don't know how to make it delicious, that food will never get in your mouth. It will just contribute to the waste. So I think the barrier that gets acknowledged the least is giving people the tools and resources and knowing how to confidently work in the kitchen. Not recipes. Recipes just words on paper, people, but to have food sense, like you have number sense so you can count, like you have literary sense so you can read. You need a culinary sense so you can cook without a recipe, without a book, without someone guiding you through it. You have to learn it, just like we learn how to tie our shoes and ride a bike.
Yeah, I really like that point because I think, to your point, like when we have this conversation about food access, and I think that's what makes maybe it's such a complex conversation, is because it has so many layers of access. So because like you said, there's an access of some communities maybe don't have access to what we would consider healthy food options. Maybe they just have more convenient stores and fast food. Then you have the layer of, okay, maybe we have the food, right? But then what do you do with the food? How do you prepare the food? Then there's a layer of affordability. So there's all of these things that are happening, which makes the conversation so complex,
Yeah.
because once you tackle one barrier, then there's
Another
another.
one pops up. Yeah.
Like,
I mean, you even have to look at people's intrinsic motivation. Do
mhm,
they want to cook?
mhm,
Are they happy eating fast food? Do
mhm,
they like vegetables? Have they ever been in that kind of environment where
mhm.
things didn't come out of a can,
Right,
out of the freezer? And
right.
so have they had a chance to develop the taste, the palate to even enjoy this? Do you know you don't have to boil broccoli for,
Mhm,
20 minutes? Do you even know that? So there's so much to consider. But I think the one thing that is taken for granted is that there's a lack of food. There may be a lack of food where you're standing right now, but
mhm,
there's an excess over there.
mhm,
So I think the distribution chains are definitely broken. And I think in order to be self-sufficient and self-reliant and to feed our community, we do have to grow food,
mhm.
because then you're not reliant upon this system. And I'm not saying you got to break out there and have this whole 40 acres going on in your backyard, but growing something just seems to trigger people so that they're more invested in their food and where it comes from and the quality of food that they're getting. I
Mhm,
mean, I've even done menus based off of, I won't say the chain, but it's a dollar store chain
mhm,
where I've gone in and pulled together. You can eat healthfully, even if your resources is that dollar type store.
mhm,
You just got to have the knowledge to navigate
mhm,
how to do that.
mhm, mhm,
You got to be kind of savvy in pulling the best of what's available to you,
mhm.
um, so that you do have what people would call healthy food. And that's a trigger word. We ain't going there.
Right. That's a whole nother coffee
I
chat.
could go there. There's food and there's not food,
Right.
right? Or as I think it was Michael Pollan said, edible substances or food-like substances. Just because you can put it in your mouth
Right.
doesn't make it food. And that's something that children have to be taught. That's something adults have to be taught. Just
Right.
because you can chew it and swallow it does not make it food.
No, I think that's
It's
such a good point. And even the nuances of, like you said, wanting to cook and the growing it, there's just so many levels. And I always tell people there's not a right and a wrong way.
right. Nope.
And making sure, because part of access is what you just talked about. Part of access is also just knowledge, so
Yeah.
that people can make the right choices for themselves. I always tell people, we're not trying to dictate the choice, but having access to the thing, and then also access to understanding and knowledge, then you're prepared to make whatever choice makes sense for you and for your family, for your lifestyle. Because I'm not growing nothing. I have no way have like a green thumb. I would love to go to the farmer's market. I know my place is, that's not my place, right? But supporting like local producers is, and like building that economy. So I always tell people, it's not like you said, you don't have to create it in your backyard and that's the solution, but there's so many ways to do it. And so when we talk about like schools and ECE sites, what do you think, or how do you think schools and ECE sites, and that's just early child care sites for people that don't use ECE, can play in like feeding the community as a whole? And we
Well,
saw it a little bit during the pandemic, but I think we're trying to move
yeah.
toward not just focusing on the students or the children, but focusing on the community.
So 70% of our kids are in early care education in the United States. So that's huge considering 80% of the population has kids. Um, if you look at certain health changes, public health changes that have been implemented over time, like wearing seatbelts, stopping smoking, just say no, they were targeted at children and they trickle up. Even birth control, when targeted at teenagers, trickles up into health education for the adults in the family. So if we are tying our children to where their food comes from, how it is produced, what it does for their bodies in terms of nutrition and altering health trajectories, particularly for those who are at risk, those we've got studies that show it trickles up. So the ECEs, the schools are tremendously important, not just because they feed the children, but because what children learn about food, healthy habits, healthy behaviors, and healthy actions about food. All of that is paramount. If you look at trying to implement behavioral change, it's one of the hardest things to do. So if you can start them young, going down the right path, this is something that they can come back to later in life. The knowledge is there, just like learning how to read, learning your math. You learn where food comes from and what it does for your body, and how to mindful eating, giving gratitude, seasonality, what local means where you are, how to connect to a farmer or a farmer's market. You learn all of these things by age 6. It's a part of your being. And we have more research that shows that these activities, these farm to school and farm to ECE activities, when they're built into the curriculum, like they're not just a one-off fun thing to do, but when this is part of the school and the school's culture, it's health and wellness statement, kids eat more fruits and vegetables. That's our goal. It's small bites, but they eat more fruits and vegetables. And that's what we're looking for. They, children, a lot of children have neophobia. That's just their natural fear of new things, foods in particular. But we're talking repeat exposures. We're talking positive peer pressure. I've seen kids check like, you gonna eat those? Because, they're good for you. They check each other. And you can get even reluctant picky eaters, quote unquote, picky eaters, because I don't like to use that word. You can get them to eat fruits and vegetables as well, because it is a group environment, because it is positive associations and positive affirmations of their behaviors and trying something new. I've taught after school, maybe 8 years now, cooking and nutrition class, and my youngest kids are pre-K, and it goes up to 5th grade for that particular class. And the pre-K kids I have for half a year, so I get to really see their behavior. And a lot of my work in that is what kind of led me to write my book, because parents were always like, how did you get them to eat that? How did you get her to eat squash? How did you get him to eat something green? I didn't get him to eat it. He willingly ate it. She willingly ate it. She eats with me all the time. So I started putting some of these things down, like, okay, this is where parents are really struggling, so that I can help them feel confident in feeding their kids. Because, when you have a baby, they just send you home with no instructions, no little pamphlet on what you're going to do for the next 18, 25, 30 years. How are you going to feed this person? How are you going to help shape their healthy habits? They don't send you any of that. So from the time you take home a baby, you're obsessed with what they eat and what's in their diaper, because that's how you know your child is healthy. The pediatrician will say, "Oh, how many wet diapers do you have a day?" So you're obsessed with how many ounces are they getting,
Mm.
and it never ends. You would think by the time your child is 3, you could relax, but no, now you're like, all she eats is blueberries. Oh my God, all she eats is blueberries. She's gonna die. And then your child goes to school and they're like, oh, learning standards, and you got to have your child can't perform if they're not getting, XYZ food. Or we have a standardized test coming up. Make sure you eat brain food. What does that mean? So this goes on and on and on, and parents are ill-equipped to feed their kids. And we used to have a community that would help support that. Like, grandma, grandpa would pick up the kids and the kids would eat dinner over there. So you knew they were eating good because grandma always had good food. They were eating real food. She wasn't making shortcuts. She was cooking.
Right.
We don't even have that anymore. We're so isolated and nuclear that we've just lost all support as far as like feeding families.
Mhm.
It's a little daunting and scary.
Right.
So, but again, that was kind of where the book found its roots.
And that makes me think, like, when we talk about just how do you feed a community, and then the answer to that is community, like getting back to that whole concept of community is like part of like the solution and the root part of that solution. And we also hear a lot of conversations in the space about, the I wouldn't want to say the struggle between the two concepts, but I think that's how it's they're pitted against each other sometimes. The idea of like cost of food and valuing food, like usually those two ideas are made to be like contrasting, but I think there are important concepts and topics just because of the state of reality. How do you see we can do both, right? Because everyone, I think it's important that both are honored, right? I don't really see them as like opposing things.
Right.
And so how do you see that we could do both of those things?
So the value of food is something that you take on personally, and then you make it a family and a community value. Or if you're in a school setting, it becomes part of your health and wellness. It becomes a value inside your center or inside of your school. And so it bumps up on the priority list. It takes precedence. So I'll give a family example. If you're going to recenter the value of food for your family, then you're probably going to be cooking more, and you're going to have family time at the table, and you're going to kind of insist and encourage that this happen. You're going to make it happen. You're going to enroll your family to be participants in this activity. And I strongly suggest you enroll your family, because this shouldn't be you driving this if this is a family value. Everyone should have some say in what's coming to the table and what they're going to eat. The cost is offset by the shift in priorities of your values. So if you're going to make food a priority, then you should probably go the healthy route and reduce the amount of meat and dairy that is generally consumed in an American diet. And when you reduce the amount of meat and dairy, you open up more funds for fruits, vegetables, grains, beans, legumes, and things of that nature. So you're not spending more money on food. You're reallocating your funds to the foods that actually nourish your body. It turns out those foods are cheaper than the foods that really don't contribute as much to your health and well-being. A lot of people don't know that. So there are programs like Cooking Matters, which is pretty awesome because it runs you through a $10 challenge where you feed a family of 4 for $10. When I say that, people go, you can't feed a family of 4 for $10, but you absolutely can. And they've got a whole book of recipes that shows that you can do this. I've facilitated that program several times with teens, with elders, with adults with children, and it's a slam dunk. It's a winner, because once you know, again, like once you have the knowledge, once you know you can feed a family of 4 for $10, no one can take that knowledge away from you. And now you can decide how you want to distribute your funds to feed your family. You are empowered to make the choice that best fits your family or your lifestyle or your community. So the cost, even in a center standpoint, is offset because now we're investing into the health of our children and the health of our families. So I think that's why farm to school and farm to ECE people become so passionate about it, is they see hey, even my staff is losing weight, or my kids are having less sick days,
Mhm.
or my parents are now involved and they're helping us garden. Parents we used to never see are showing up in our center, and we're giving them tools to bond with their children at home with, because again, parents who are new don't know how to parent a lot of times. And so they look to the school, especially in ECE, they look to centers and ECE teachers to show them how to teach their kids and bond with their children. It's an interesting, that's a whole nother conversation, but yeah.
No, I think that that's definitely a framework that's helpful. Like when people are trying to figure out cost and value, but seeing like how's that offset? Like what does that look like? And then I think too, this would be a whole nother conversation, but also part of it is I always say like when we're talking about like housing and food and healthcare, like and how these are all things that people need, like then the real conversation is making sure people have like a living wage, like making sure that people can survive. Like that's the way in which people can have and afford all of the things that they need. It's not always just like reducing this one thing or reducing this one thing, because inflation is real and the markets change, but if people are constantly having and are being paid what they need to survive, that's, I think, a key part of the conversation. And then we touched on this a little bit about how like healthy can be like a triggering word, right? How do we define that? What does that look like? So for you, and maybe it's even a different word, but when you have the conversation about healthy cooking, what does that mean and look like for you?
Um, for my family, I'm looking for balance as incredibly simply outlined by the My Plate diagram. Like that's just like easy ground level. Um, when I'm working with the community, I focus more on plant-based recipes because that seems to be where the knowledge drops off. Like everybody's got 10 ways to cook chicken, but if I give you some rutabagas, you're gonna stand there and scratch your head. So I really, even in my youngest of classes, we don't cook meat. And I'm not a vegetarian. I'm not even gonna go down that path of that's a rocky road and a whole other conversation we can have. But in my teaching, I don't tend to include meat unless someone asks for it. Or I always have a recipe that could be modified to be meatless. Even when I do virtual cooking classes with kids, it may say chicken stir fry, but it's chicken tofu shrimp stir fry. It says honey glazed salmon, but it's honey glazed salmon or tofu or chicken. You know what I mean? Like I am real clear that we need to be making space for more vegetables. So that's where I focus. Vegetables tend to be per pound more inexpensive than meats as well. So it's an economic choice because people seem to think healthy eating is expensive. And I push back on that. I also like to tie people to their food culture so that you honor that. A lot of the stuff that gets passed down from the FDA is very grilled chicken, steamed broccoli, and brown rice. And my people don't eat that. Okay. I'm from the South. My people don't eat that. Okay. I mean, they can, but they don't want to. So if you're going to compete against Big Mama sweet potato pie and her macaroni and cheese, and your answer to that is you need to eat steamed broccoli and brown rice, you just lost the room. You just became culturally insensitive. You didn't even look to see what else Big Mama got going on, like those green beans and that collard greens and those sweet potatoes that all came out her side kitchen garden that she magically seems to grow. I don't know, but it just magically, right? Or that corn from your uncle's field over there. Or the okra that, she traded okra with some fig preserves that she put up last winter. We're not even looking at the value of what's in our community. So I stop right there and say, what are you doing right? Even with parents, even with how to feed a kid, there's only 3 things you really need to do. Parents, you're already doing some of the right things. And people who are struggling with food, you're doing right things. So let's look at it. Don't run away from it. Don't run away from your food, your culture, where you feel comfortable. Don't run away from your comfort food.
Right.
But look at it. How can we shift it up, renew it, refresh it? How can we tie it to seasonality? How can we tie it to local growers? How can we tie it to people we already know in our community?
Right.
And then how can we literally nourish ourselves and nourish our communities with food as the medium?
Mm,
Because that's kind of where I am. I pull like a network. I pull all these things together, but food is the medium. So
yeah.
with Small Bites Adventure Club, we're doing all this learning and playing and creativity, but food is the medium. We're
Mhm.
touching on all these curricular standards in my after school class, but food is the medium. I'm
Yeah.
pulling in math, science, history. And when I'm out in the community, I'm pulling on your cultural background and your knowledge that you already have, plus what we know to be healthy and proven with science, but food is still the medium.
Mhm.
It's what unites us.
Yeah. I think
You
that's
have to eat.
right. Right. We all have to eat.
Okay, you
Right.
have to eat.
And too, like to your point about like really looking at our own communities and what we have and and that we're all doing things like right in that framework of right. And I always tell people like if you want to be vegetarian or not, like for me, it's about always understanding like it's not to do it in excess. I always tell people, I'm not telling you can never have a burger for the rest of your life, right? And I think it ties really well back to what you were saying. It's just when you know how to prepare different things, how to make a dish 5, 10 different ways, how to do it like plant-based or with meat, it just gives you a variety of options,
Mhm.
right? A variety of ways of doing something. And so it expands your taste buds because I think sometimes people that tension about like healthy food and healthy eating and that cultural dynamic, it comes from a lot of things you said, like people being culturally insensitive, right? Like not understanding people's cultures, people feeling like the standards of health and beauty are built around the white dominant narrative and it doesn't create space for other cultures and ways of being, right? And the definition of healthy, getting back to it's more of just understanding like not doing things in excess and no one's saying you can never have chocolate again for the rest of your life, but it can't be the only thing that you're eating or the main portion of your diet. And I think that conversation and the more that people have information about options, because you think about that, like if you only know the only way you know how to make vegetables to your point is like boiling them or make a salad, like past that you don't know what to do with them.
Right. So you're actually at a disadvantage now because there's a whole world of food out here that you don't know how to navigate. And adults don't like to do things they're not good at.
Yep.
Um, we just struggle with that in general. So that's where you get another pushback, and that's pure ego. But that's where you get another pushback about learning and exploring. When kids encounter food, they don't come with that kind of baggage,
Mm,
and they don't cook to, as an ends to a means.
mm,
They're involved in the experience of it.
mm,
They're just as delighted measuring as they are pouring, as they are stirring, as they are sitting down to eat. In fact, a lot of times, in order to get children to eat better, I tell parents get them involved in the process to some degree. But my son, for the longest, would sit here and make vegetable soup and not eat it. He just like being in the kitchen with me. But
mm.
guess what? He knows how to make vegetable soup. One day he'll eat it.
Right.
He'll get there. He'll get there. So
Right.
that um that idea that we have to do it right, that we have to know everything can be hobbling.
Mhm,
We also have this ridiculous diet culture that's standing over your shoulder, like you're gonna eat all of that.
yep,
Make sure you have a salad first.
mhm,
Drink sips of water in between, so
mhm.
that you can't even sit down and enjoy a meal.
Right.
And food is like one of our first comforts. You're born and somebody puts you on the boob. It's just that fast, right? Food is one of our first comforts. And
Mhm,
we've gotten to the point in our culture where it is a divisive
mhm,
thing. Not just at school where you got the haves and the have-nots, who's got money on their card, who's bringing a lunch versus who's eating a cheese sandwich because they don't have any money.
mhm,
But it's a point of contention in our own homes, and there are kids at the table crying. There are parents at the table crying. There are people who prepared food that feel unappreciated. There's food going in the trash, which is just burning money. There's all these tensions and resentments building, and it doesn't have to be that way.
mhm,
And that's why I said my book is a love letter to parents. We all have to feed these kids.
mhm,
You do not have to struggle every night. You
mhm.
do not have to fight to feed your children. And you need to understand why they're doing what they're doing. It really helps diffuse the bomb. And so, like, my book is not a cookbook. It is literally a guide for parents. And I have sections on various topics that present as picky eating.
Mm.
One of those examples was my own child was sitting at a table moping over this breakfast that I know he loves, that's made just for him. It's like a home run. And he's not eating it, and he can't articulate why.
Mm.
When I started asking questions, it really boiled down to the fact that he lost like 3 teeth in a week.
Mm.
He can chew,
Mm-hmm.
and his mouth, all the food tasted bad.
Mm-hmm.
But he's, I think, 7 or 8 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have the self-awareness or even the lexicon to have this conversation and start it himself. I had to draw it out of him.
Mm-hmm.
And so that inspired me to do an entire chapter just on teeth and orthodontics,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and how this is going to impact how and what and when your child eats. As a parent, if you knew that, do you know how many arguments that would save?
Mm-hmm.
If you knew that the how, when, and what your child eats can be based off of physical development or peer pressure or being an athlete or turning into a vegetarian or whatever these different things that kids go through, if you knew that, then you wouldn't have to argue about it. You would know how to navigate it. And so
Right.
that's why I wrote the book. Too many of us are fighting at the dinner table, and food should be a human right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's definitely culturally an opportunity. It has always drawn people together
Mm-hmm.
for humans. So why are we fighting our own family at the dinner table? Why are
Right.
you resenting your kids at the end of every meal? Why are they stomping off the room and slamming doors? It shouldn't be like that.
Right.
It's like the world is stacked against us. Let us have this 10 minutes together where we can drop all our titles
Mm-hmm.
and break bread.
Yeah.
And I can just vibe with you over
Right.
a plate, you know?
And I think something you said about like the relationship that we have with food, like, and how we've gotten to this place where there's this love hate relationship with food, when, to your point, like, it should be this nurturing and mindful like eating experience, but because of like different vantage points from society, it's become this issue of tension, like the pressure you said, like the diets and how you look. So even if you have food, right, and you're not even struggling to think about conceptually where your next meal is going to come from, you could be struggling with that. And then there's still, sadly today, we still have people that's food insecurity is a real thing, that people don't know where the next meal is going to come from. So when you have it and you don't have it, there's still this tension with food, right? And how we see and judge ourselves through food.
Yeah.
And it's taught at such a young age, and then we teach it again and again and again to our children. And so I think, to the point that you're making about why it's so important to start like at the level of ECE in school, and that relationship with food,
Yes.
so crucial. It's just
Healthy habits, healthy attitudes,
Mhm.
healthy behaviors. And I can't stress the healthy attitudes enough, because that's how we see, it's how we frame it, it's how we see it, it's how we interpret it.
Mhm.
It's from that healthy attitude. So if you have a healthy attitude about food, relationship with food, and it pains me to see people at war with food.
Mm.
And I don't know, it's because I'm a chef. I love food. I love food. And food is my love language. If you want to love on me, feed me. And
Mhm.
if I love you, I will feed you.
Yeah.
I'm one of those, when I see you, have you eaten? Are you hungry? You
Mhm.
know, that's me. So it pains me to see people
Mhm.
at war with food, especially because you have to eat.
Mhm.
This isn't an option. So that would be like if every time you had to take a breath,
Mhm.
you were at war with that. You had you were unhappy, you felt insecure, you felt angry, or you felt, you know, any negativity with every breath you take.
Mhm.
And it's the same basic necessity. It is a human necessity. Um, yeah.
That's such a deep correlation. Like, I love that metaphor, tying it to breathing, because it is like there's people, and so many, that struggle with every meal. Like I said, if you had to take a breath and you felt insecure and doubted yourself, and that was a struggle, but you have to do it Same
Or
with,
if every time you tried to take a breath, the air wasn't there. If
oh,
you had to think about and plan where you could get your air. What if you're running through your day holding your breath because it's
mm,
not available?
right.
And then when it is available, somebody judges the air you breathe. What if the air that you finally get access to is polluted?
Hmm.
Right? So that happens a lot. I see that on the ground at the community level. Oh, we're not going to pass this out. That's not healthy. That's not your choice
Hmm.
when someone is hungry.
Mm,
You are not here to decide what they get. You are here to make sure they get it. And never underestimate someone else's agency to choose what is best for them. Put the stuff in the box
mhm,
and give them the box. Do not filter and what's the word? Censor
mhm,
people's food access
mhm,
if you're here to give people food. That's
mhm,
not your job. Oh, but it's all this artificial this. I hear you. I hear you.
mhm,
But what is your mission? Are you here to distribute food? Because that's what we're gonna do here. And if
mhm,
you want to do, if you have another mission, you can do that. But
mhm,
if we're dealing with hungry people,
mhm, mhm.
you that's really a touch point for me.
Very much a touch point for me because I think that's the biggest issue I sometimes see in this movement is this struggle between like what you just said, like it's all about knowledge and access to information and this idea that you need to make the choices for people. Like you know better, it's your role to what you just did, censor for them versus just making sure that they have all the tools, resource, equal access, like truly when we say equal access, because that's also knowledge, that's all those barriers being taken down. And then knowing that they're going to make the right choice for them that allows that space for what you talked about earlier, being culturally competent and not trying to force different decisions on people. I think that is one of the most important things. If anyone can take anything from this conversation that works in this space, I really wanted you to take that point that she just made about that. And that leads to my next question, because that really ties to people's agency and people's power, right? And their ability to make decisions for themselves. And I mentioned earlier at NFSN, we launched our new call to action that 100% of communities would hold power in a racially just food system. But when we were talking about that and went back and forth about, okay, well, then how are we going to define this? How are we going to define power? And really landed on that we can't define power, right? We have to leave the space for power to be self-defined by individuals and communities and look at ourselves as making sure that people have the access to the resources and tools to build the community that they want to see. So for you, what would that look like? Holding power in your community, or for you, that concept of holding power in a racially just food system, what would that food system look like?
I feel that power is rooted in agency. I feel that it is rooted in a person's level of or sense of self-competency.
Mm,
If people feel that they have access, if people feel in equitable access, if people feel they have the tools and resources to grow, receive, prepare, distribute food, then I would say that it's equitable. If people feel that something's being kept from them, they don't have enough of something, they don't know how to get it, what to do with it, who to give it to, they're not empowered. And that can be on any side
mm,
of the line. If you don't have a flow, there is a lack of power.
mm,
If you do not have a sense of abundance
mm,
or comfortability, there is a lack of power.
mm,
And that will look different inside of every house,
mhm,
every church, every community, and every school, every network of people.
mhm.
But where there is lack, there's an imbalance of power.
I love that. I think that's a great way of thinking about it. Because once you see that, you see that no one chooses to have less, right? So that is a great way of looking about the imbalance of power is there when that exists.
And even when you go into community work, a lot of times people come with their prescribed program. They're defined and it's got a seal of approval from some university or some government agency, and they come on in the community and we're going to do the work. Yes. So they get to work and they're changing habits and they're changing belief systems. They're not changing nothing because they didn't ask the people in the community, what do you need? What do you need? You come in here with your new whatever. It could be a drug. It could be a school. It could be a community garden because you think your community garden is the bee's knees. But did you ask the community if they wanted or a garden? Yeah, but they need to eat more vegetables. Did you ask the community if they wanted more vegetables? But they need it because that's what they say. Because studies show. But did you ask the community what vegetables they already eat? Why do they need a community garden if that particular community people are growing food in the backyard? Just stuff to think about. What if it's a rural community and people are actually growing food and selling it at the market on the weekend? You know, they've got vegetables. They've got 4 tons of carrots out there, you know, in that field. So are you really doing the work that the community needs?
Yeah.
These are just questions you got to ask before you jump in there with your program or your curriculum. We all have good intentions.
Yeah.
If you didn't do your due diligence, you may be wasting everyone's time. I know when I was getting my MPH, somebody was telling a story of a town where they wanted to bring in books because girls who are literate do better, like their life outcomes, they're healthier, they hold jobs, they do this, that, and the third. But what the community didn't have was running water. Right.
You're speaking all the things right now. I'll never forget this conversation I was having with this environmental group, and they wanted us to support a plastic bag tax. And they were just going on about how we need this tax. I personally don't support any regressive taxation, any type of taxation that automatically impacts people less money. I personally don't support, right? And so we were going back and forth, and I understood, and I was talking about bans. We went back and forth, and then I just stopped and I said, you want us to right now debate a conversation around plastic bags, but in our community right now, they had just removed the last grocery store within a 5 to 10 mile radius. We don't have food to put in a plastic
bag. You missing the point, right?
I'm not even there. Like so I just had to stop the conversation because we're going back and forth and they're trying to get our organization to support it. And I was just like, this is not even a conversation that my community needs to have right now. Like you're having a conversation from that is important. Not saying the conversation you have is not important, but it's from a position of privilege that we're not at, because you're not even thinking about the concept of not even having anything to put in a bag.
Not even having groceries to put in the bag. Yes.
To put in the bag. I said, that's where we're at. So if you want to have an environmental justice conversation, let's have a conversation about that. And you know, they had to stop and think, because it was this idea that, and I think what triggered it was they said, well, we just have to teach people in the community that this is important. And I said, no, what you need to understand, you don't have to teach certain communities that the environment matters, as if these communities don't know that. But you don't know what the most pressing issue is for that community.
Yes.
And it goes back to all the conversations we've even been having about racial justice and the social tension that we've been having as a country. It's like when you're asking, you know, for myself, you know, especially Black community, for me, when we were having generations of seeing our people like oppressed, and then in this moment, like sanctioned murders of our community, it's not to say that other issues don't matter, but if we're taking a moment to talk about what's happening right now and understanding what maybe some healing and the trauma that's happening right now and not being tone deaf to that. So I think that what you just said is so crucial. If you're going to come into a community and you're going to bypass what the need is right now. I've seen organizations say they're going to go into a juvenile detention center for gardening, but not want to focus on root causes of anything of why
incarceration in the first place. Right.
And I'm like,
yeah,
got to understand the needs of the community. So I just want to thank you so much for raising that. When we do this work, it's not to say programs that we've done before, ideas aren't great ideas, but you can't just take it up and drop it in.
Right. It is not a cookie cutter solution. And so one of the partners that I work with, Georgia Organics, is part in quality care for children. They have a Kellogg grant that they bring in different early care education, either home sites or centers, and we help them develop their farm to ECE plan. Every one of them is different. Every one of them is in it for a different reason. Every one of them wants different outcomes. Therefore, every plan has to be different. It's still farm to ECE, but it is, we cannot cookie cutter this and expect it to be successful. Interventions have to be malleable and they have to have enough plasticity so that they can be adapted to individual communities or whomever is being served. The person, the community, the end user who's being served is the priority. And the intervention has to flow toward that end.
Exactly. This has been such an awesome conversation. And I'm reading the chat. Yes, I wanted to go on and on and on as well. But just thanking everyone for just tuning in. And we want to share this out. The one thing about us doing these conversations Facebook Live is the idea is that for people that can't tune in right now, we still want to share it, tag, get this message wide and far as possible. And we want to remind people to like our page. Make sure you like and follow us here on Facebook. You can join our e-newsletter by going to our website to stay up to date on our next month's coffee chat. And if you found this conversation valuable and you want to donate, you could do that. That's also on our website. And we just ask people to get connected, and with our call to action, we really know that we cannot do this by ourselves. We know that we have to activate so many more people to make this a reality. So we are inviting you to go with us on that journey. Soon we'll be launching an invite for a shifting power conversation that we're going to be having as an organization. So please stay tuned. If you join our newsletter, you'll get more information about that. And we'll be launching a new partner structure that is aligned with our call to action. So we have so many updates coming up. And so if you join our newsletter, you can stay up to date with the things that we are doing. Again, I'm Crystal Orietta, the Senior Director of Policy and Programs at the National Farm to School Network. And I am so thankful for you joining us today. And this was such a great conversation. I felt like I was just talking to someone, forgot I was on video, had to make sure to say anything. Didn't want to have recorded for everyone to see, because it was such a real conversation about how we feed our community and what we need to do to move forward. And I want to give you the last word if there's anything you'd like to add.
No, just thank you. I mean, thank you for having us on today. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for bringing up these topics that are really uncomfortable sometimes for people, the relationships that they have with food, the classism and the all the things that are wrapped up into what food is. I want everyone to work on their relationship with food. If you're a parent, you're out there struggling with feeding your family, you've got this war going on, please pick up my book, How to Feed a Kid. I promise it's a short read, and it will get y'all back at the table where you can bond and love each other. And that's really what it's about. Food is love. There's the book.
Love it.
Funny.
She's And we'll drop information in the chat so everyone can stay connected. And hopefully we'll see you guys next month. So thank you everyone for tuning in to our NFSN coffee chat on how we can feed the community. See you next time.
Bye. Thank you.